Assalamualaikum. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last day of our ISPRM International Rehabilitation Week 2021. My name is Zaliha, and I'm from Malaysia, currently residing in Japan.
My name is Minchol Jang from South Korea. Hi.
Hola, bienvenidos. My name is Constanza Leal from Chile, a rehabilitation physician and current country ambassador for the World Youth Forum of ISPRM.
The three of us will be moderators for today, and we are supported by our ISPRM office as hosts, Jessica Aidi and Nicole Kalushi.
Yes, additional files for today's sessions are available on the handout section. You can find near the chat, and you can download any additional files. Please feel free to use the questions feature if you want to ask the speakers or if you need any assistance. All the sessions will be recorded, and you will be notified once the material is available for you to access. Let's kick off this event with a message from ISPRM Rehab Week Organizing Committee member, Dr. Mohamed Tawab Karil, introducing our program for today.
Welcome to the final day of ISPRM International Rehabilitation Week 2021. I am Dr. Muhammad Tawab Khalil from Pakistan, and I am one of the members of organizing committee. Today we have 3 sessions planned for you. The first session is actually a debate between aging as a disease versus aging as not a disease. The second session will focus on the rehabilitation response to healthy aging, and the last session will focus on the importance of research for healthy aging. I hope you will enjoy our today's session and will ask questions from our speakers via Q&A session. And remember to write where you are from. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start our first session today with a debate on aging as a disease versus aging as not as a disease with Professor Friedberg Kohler and Professor Suresh Ratan. The ICD-11 replaces the ICD-10 starting 1st of January 2022 as the global standard for coding health information and causes of death and has classified aging as a disease. The speakers will debate on this topic to instigate the discussion and present both sides. Professor Suresh Ratan is a professor emeritus of biogerontology at the Department of Molecular Biology and Genetics, Aarhus University, Denmark. His research areas and expertise include genetics, human cells, and application of the concept of mild stress-induced hormesis as a molecular modulator of aging. He is the recipient of the Lord Cohen Medal in Gerontology from the British Society for Research on Aging, and an honorary doctorate from the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences. He is the founding editor-in-chief of Biogerontology, an international peer-reviewed journal published by Springer Nature. He is the present chairman of the biological section of the European region for the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics. Professor Friedberg Kohler is the Clinical Director of Aged Care and Rehabilitation for Southwestern Sydney Local Health District and Professor of the Southwestern Sydney Clinical School of the University of NSW Sydney. He is the past president of ISPO. His primary clinical position as a senior staff specialist in rehabilitation medicine in Brightside Hospital, part of the Hammond Care. He was awarded the Order of Australia Medal in recognition of his long-standing dedicated contributions to rehabilitation medicine services in Southwest Sydney, Australia, and internationally. He is the co-director of the Age and Aging Clinical Academic Group, Maridulu Budwari Gumal, a broad translational health research partnership. Now, let's start with Professor Rattan's argument, aging should not be classified as a disease, and then we'll explore Professor Kohler's argument on why aging should be classified as a disease.
Hi, I'm Suresh Rattan in Aarhus University, Denmark, and the International Society for Physical and Rehabilitation Medicine have asked me to present my views about the issue, is aging a disease or is old age a disease? So in this short presentation, I would like to give you my understanding of this question, which clearly is no, aging and old age is not a disease. How do I drive or arrive at this conclusion is actually after more than 40 years of my involvement in the field of biogerontology through research, through teaching, through supervising, through mentoring, through writing, that what have I understood about the question of aging as such, and how do I arrive at the conclusion that I will not like to consider aging as a disease or old age as a disease. Now, point number one, aging, unlike any disease, happens in all individuals. In all individuals, especially if they continue to survive and live beyond what we call essential lifespan of a species. So according to the Darwinian theory of evolution, every species requires certain duration of time for survival, during which it is born, it grows up, matures, and then reproduces for the continuation of generations. And that period is generally now referred to as essential lifespan, or some of my friends also call it warranty period. So if you live beyond the essential lifespan of your species, then that is when aging sets in. And number two point, that aging, when we use the word aging, that is generally the period and the process of all downhill path ending into death. Now, this is a progressive period during which we lose function. There are more impairments at all levels of the body, at the physiological level, at the cellular level, at the system level, at the biochemical and molecular level. It's all downhill path. That's what aging is. Number three, these changes which occur during this period of aging or through the process of aging in our old age, those changes are hundreds of changes have been described, and they generally have all these negative effects, like eventually resulting into loss of function. And those changes, if they happen to cross certain threshold values which have been agreed upon by biomedical scientists, then they can be labeled as a disease. Yeah? Diseases of aging, just like that's basically the definition, or the condition is that if they are beyond certain threshold, and then they can be labeled as a disease. And like you can have diabetes 2, and then you can have osteoporosis, you can have sarcopenia, you can have Alzheimer's disease, you can have Parkinson's disease. But these things are happening in a smaller proportion of the aging group. Whereas aging is still happening. All those things which happen in these disease situations, which are the extreme situations, are happening in the so-called non-disease situation. So aging is the cause of all these conditions which we call age-related diseases, and which need immediate and acute intervention and management and whatever else we can do. So that is the number 3 point, that aging can lead to, or that survival period. And the reason for those things is the life itself. Because evolution does not work on perfect systems. Evolution has not made our maintenance, repair, and defense systems as perfect. Evolution never works on perfect systems. It only works on what works for its end point, like the continuation of generations. So the life itself is imperfect, and that is the cause of aging in many ways. I will explain it a little bit more later on. So most importantly, what I have understood, point number 4 from biogerontology is that evolution has not made perfect systems, so things are allowed to happen if we continue to live beyond essential lifespan. But the beauty is evolution has not made any specific mechanisms either from killing me from within. There are no genes, no gerontogenes which cause aging. Genes are there, hundreds of genes are there for survival, for maintenance, for defense, for repair. But those are not perfect genes. So the beauty of the evolution is it has neither created perfect systems to survive forever, nor has it created any mechanisms to get rid of these systems, to kill the systems. So what comes back is that then we have to deal with aging ourselves. So if you really want to understand the causes of aging, what causes of aging, that's the life itself. Every time I breathe air, I take in oxygen and nitrogen, which inside my system in the biochemical metabolites produce numerous free radicals and other damaging metabolites. Every time I eat food, the sugars in the food and the other components in the food create so much molecular damage at various levels. Every time a biochemical process occurs in our body, those processes are not perfect. They are error prone and they make mistakes at the level of DNA duplication, RNA synthesis, protein translation. And system cannot cope with that because it can only cope for around essential lifespan. So if you want to call aging as a disease, then you have to call life as a disease, because life is the cause of aging and old age. So my position is very clear that I will not like to call aging as a disease from intellectual and biological point of view. Age-related diseases do happen, and like any other disease, those diseases are always happening in certain proportion of the population, which can be from few percent to pretty high percent. But there is, to the best of my knowledge, there is no disease which happens to everybody. So aging which happens to everybody if we keep living long enough, it is not a disease in my understanding of the phenomenon. Thank you.
Esteemed guests, I would like to thank the International Society for Prosthetics and Orthotics and the International Society for Physical and Rehabilitation Medicine for inviting me to present on the debate, Aging is a Disease. I was asked to speak in support of the title, Aging is a Disease. Intuitively, one would think that aging does not appear to be a disease, but rather a process which predisposes to a larger number of diseases without being a disease itself. However, if we search a little deeper, we find that there is significant evidence to support the argument that aging is a disease. I will outline some arguments which will enable you to come to your own conclusion. Ultimately, I believe aging is a disease, but as yet has not been recognized or defined as such by the World Health Organization. To understand this better, we need to look at the definition of disease, the definition of health, and the definition of aging and compare them. We will then look at some diseases which have been wrongly assigned as diseases in the past, and some that have only been recently recognized. Then we will look at some of the processes which have been ascribed to aging and unravel how some of these processes are neither irreversible nor relentlessly progressive. And finally, I will talk about the consequences of not recognizing aging as a disease and the potential benefits of classifying aging as a disease. The World Health Organization does not have a clear definition of disease. Without a clear definition, it is almost impossible to categorize individual conditions as disease or not. If we consider dictionary or other definitions of disease, we find descriptions such as disease is any abnormality of bodily structure or function other than those arising directly from physical injury, or a disease is a definite pathological process that impairs normal functioning and has a characteristic set of signs and symptoms. It may affect the whole or any part, and its etiology, pathology, and prognosis may be known or unknown. The changes related to aging certainly fit these definitions from the point of view that they are abnormalities of bodily function or structure. They do not arise from physical injury, and that there is impairment of normal functioning, and indeed the commonly used phrase geriatric syndrome or geriatric syndromes represents a characteristic set of signs and symptoms. So purely on a definition of disease, aging is a disease. According to the World Health Organization, health is defined as a state with complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Aging certainly again fits the criteria of an absence of health, and by implication, the presence and the definition of disease. Finally, aging is defined as follows: the collection of changes that render human beings progressively more likely to die, or a progressive deterioration of physiological function, an intrinsic age-related process of loss of viability and increase in vulnerability. The definitions generally include progressive deterioration of function at the level of the organism or the cell. It is this progressive deterioration which the opponents to aging being a disease would suggest clearly indicates that aging is not a disease. We understand today that many progressive diseases which in the past have been determined to be incurable and unstoppable are now able to be treated with appropriate medical or other interventions. It is defeatist to suggest that no further interventions or developments will eventuate, so that more and more of the progressive changes of aging can be slowed down or possibly stopped altogether, or even be reversible in the future. Incorrect classification or non-classification as a disease has a long history. Drapetomania is a name which was given to an apparent historical disease referring to black slaves who ran away from plantations and apparently required a medical cure. Masturbation was considered a disease treated with horrendous, grotesque surgical procedures to bring about a supposed cure. As recently as 1974, homosexuality was considered to be a disease and was classified as abnormalities of endocrine functions, amongst other things. There is therefore a very good argument to be made that we should not use the term disease without proper substantiation. In contrast, osteoporosis was described as being part of the normal aging process until 1994, and Alzheimer's disease was considered to be normal until 1977. Both diseases are very common in the aging population, although they have only been recognized in the last 50 years. It is highly probable that many other conditions will be recognized as diseases in the future, as we have the means to understand their nature more completely. It is therefore also quite possible that aging itself is likely to be universally recognized as being a disease rather than just a process in the future. The value to recognize aging as disease has resulted in a dichotomy. Physiological changes such as muscle wastage, with resultant sarcopenia, reduction in bone mass and density resulting in osteoporosis, and increased arterial hardening resulting in hypertension are nearly universal in humans as they age. All are classified as diseases. In contrast, the aging process which underlines and predisposes to these diseases is argued not to be a disease. Autopsy studies have identified amyloidosis as the cause of death in approximately 70% of people older than 110. The same argument would suggest that amyloidosis is not a disease, but is a universal part of the aging process. Clearly, the argument of universality of deterioration is not a conclusive counter-argument to aging being a disease. The DNA changes which occur over many years of cell division and repair within the human body are commonly quoted to be evidence that the human body is by nature imperfect and therefore doomed to deteriorate over time. Weizmann proposed that somatic cells, as distinct from germline cells, have an intrinsic mechanism that limit their replicative capacity, while germline maintains immortal propagation of individuals. The conundrum here is quite obvious. Why would one cell line be able to propagate indefinitely and other cell lines have limited ability to do so when both cell lines have the same origin? Classifying aging as a disease will encourage us to fully explore and understand the mechanisms of cell differentiation and propagation. Just two examples of how research is continuing to advance significantly to address developmental aging of cells are the reprogramming of aged somatic cells by the administration of exogenous transcriptional regulators which can reverse developmental aging of cells, and the use of immortal and pluripotent master cell banks, allowing endless rounds of precise genetic modifications followed by clonal expansion, with subsequent differentiation into diverse, therapeutically useful cell types. A recent study outlines a new approach to reversing age-related decline by reprogramming some cells to a younger state in which they are better able to repair or replace damaged tissue. The team was able to improve the visual acuity in mice with age-related vision loss. Let me now come to the final point. The opportunities which are missed by not classifying aging as a disease. The inclusion of obesity in the ICD-10 has showed that it not only helped to attract resources to research obesity, but resulted in more frequent diagnosis of the condition. Since obesity has been classified as a disease, it is now easier for medical practitioners to convince patients to pursue healthier lifestyle and prescribe medications, even in cases where patients are comfortable with the conditions. It is expected that when aging is classified as a disease, there will be increased interest in research into aging and aging-related conditions, searching for reversible and treatable causes and contributing factors, resulting in new innovative treatments to cure and treat a large number of conditions related to aging. Esteemed audience, we must be visionary, accepting that we do not yet understand everything related to aging, that aging meets the definition of a disease, that many of the physiological and other changes related to aging may be treatable or reversible, and that novel treatments will be developed given the right climate for attracting research funds. All of this is best done in our societies if we accept that aging is a disease. Thank you very much for your attention.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, professors, for explaining your arguments on helping understand both sides. This is very interesting information, and you to share this knowledge is really a pleasure. So there's a question. First of all, I would like to know what's your opinion on these definitions that actually exist on health, aging. Do you think definitions will evolve in the next decades and maybe change your vision actually of believing if aging is or not a disease, basing on the current definitions?
Well, first of all, that was a great pleasure to listen to Professor Kohler's very, very convincing arguments and very forcefully presented. You have raised this question about the definitions. That is very important issue. We still don't have actually a really good definition of health, which Professor Kohler mentioned. That is a complete state of physical, mental, social well-being. It doesn't say anything basically. Yeah, it just replaces the word health by well-being. So in a way, health itself is still unmeasurable entity. We only measure in relation to when it is lost. So your question, Constanza, that will new definitions or refined definitions help us to focus our research or its interventions? That is definitely very, very important issue. And I wish and I hope that there will be more clearer definitions of health, even aging, even life itself.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Kohler?
And I fully agree with Professor Ratan. Definitions are dynamic and they change over time, and I have presented some of that in my presentation. And in 50 years' time, if we listen to the two recordings, they would be totally out of date and inappropriate because the definitions, the understanding has changed. Whether the basic viewpoint of aging being a disease or not will have changed in 50 years' time is a totally different question. But the definitions and the treatments, for that matter, will all change. And that is one of the exciting things about aging. We are learning more and more about aging as time goes on. And clearly, and I know that Professor Ratan agrees with us 100%, we still have a lot to learn about aging as time goes on.
Indeed, a lot to research. It's a broad field, very interesting. There's another question from Ana Belén Pava. She would like to know if how we can manage aging in our patients, and if you recommend any supplement or orthomolecular nutrition.
Well, maybe Professor Kohler should take it up first. He is a more clinical person. I'm a lab person.
I think in principle, I actually here would support Professor Ratan's presentation more. From the point of view as the best way to keep healthy in old age is to be healthy in middle age and in young age, because we seem to set a pattern which carries us through the whole life. So Professor Ratan talked about the toxic deposition in the cells, and I don't want to repeat everything, but we can minimize that through appropriate diets, through appropriate lifestyle modifications throughout our life, not just in old age. I think if you try and modify it once you're in old age, you probably have left it a little bit late. You need to start that process early. But we're talking about geriatrics here, so we would still do it in old age, but the success rate would be less.
Yeah, maybe I can add there that yes, when we are already in old age and we are having some of these very serious markers, which are these so far labeled under one or this disease, sometimes it's too late. So the question of long life, during which we have the period of old age and further subdivided into whatever period, we need to start early by maintaining health. We need to start much earlier than any of the so-called definitions of aging can be applied in terms of disease. Health means don't worry about old age, don't worry about lifespan, don't even worry about health span. We need drugs for health. Often our drug approach is always against something, drug against this, drug against that. No, if we want to do something about old age or healthy aging or health span, we have to think about how to develop new drugs for health, and which means starting much earlier on. Even then, there will be a period and life stage which will be called old age. But I wouldn't like to be called that now you are getting that disease more and more because I'm aging. No, no, no. That creates much more problems. So management issue in the hospitals, if we keep telling the people who are suffering with some of the problems associated with old age, oh, you are getting sicker and sicker and sicker because it's a disease. You are aging. There is no stage going to be in life when we don't age. So if somebody puts the label disease to my life, I think that is that creates more problems, both personally and in management. So we need drugs for health and forget about old age as a disease. That's loss of health, increase of frailty, but not a disease.
Okay, that's a very good argument, Professor Rattan. And we have another question, maybe that it's related on what you are talking about. By Sudha Balakrishnan is asking, well, the discussion is only looking at a biomedical model, but how would you define this problem from a social perspective?
Well, maybe I can continue what I was saying earlier. From a social perspective, that is so terrifying for me that when every day I'm aging, I'm in my old age, I'm now 66, and somebody starts telling me, you are sick, you are sick, you are sick, this is a disease you are getting, now you are getting it more, now you have got, so far you have 66-year disease, next year you will have 67-year disease, and there is nothing to look forward to in life. This frightens me more. I would like to then rather stop it right now, which basically means kill yourself, because life is the cause of disease. If I live, life is the cause of aging and eventual death. On the way, yes, if I cross the threshold of certain level of sugar, then I am diabetic. But if to change that threshold, then I become healthy again. What is this thing going on? There is no cause of aging. Socially, it's a much more serious issue than even biomedically.
Thank you.
And sorry, and I think the fact that you have two geriatric professors presenting here is an example of how remaining stimulated, remaining active, because certainly Professor Rattan's presentation was very coherent, remaining socially interactive actually predisposes to a state of healthiness. We know that, and we apply that in clinical practice all the time. But really, it is the very effect of remaining active as human beings that gives us the opportunity to maintain our relative useful state as long as possible. We cannot prevent the changes as life goes on, but we know that people who remain active socially, psychologically, and physically do better by and large than those who do not. So the question is quite simple. In 10 minutes, you can only address certain aspects of the whole life.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful debate, and now we are concluding this session. I thank you both professors for sharing your visions. And well, we now know that there is a key role in preventive medicine and also in the field of rehabilitation on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, now moving on to the next session today, the rehabilitation response to healthy aging presented by Dr. Vanessa Seijas. Dr. Seijas is medical specialist in physical and rehabilitation medicine at the University of Antioquia, Colombia, and a member of Health Rehabilitation Research Group of the same institution. It served as a consultant in the project packages of interventions for rehabilitation of the World Health Organization. It was the leader of the development groups for traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's disease, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorders. Currently, she is a senior researcher in rehabilitation and healthy aging at the Department of Health Sciences and Medicine of the University of Lucerne, and the Swiss Paraplegia Research. Dr. Seijas is also the secretary of the Liaison Committee of ISPRM and the WHO. Currently, Dr. Seijas is an MPH candidate at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Let's watch her presentation on the rehabilitation response to healthy aging.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Seijas. I'm a PRM physician and I want to talk today about how can rehabilitation answer to the challenge of healthy aging. Dear colleagues, thank you so much for the invitation. Let's start. I don't have any conflicts of interest for this talk. I work at the University of Lucerne and the Swiss Paraplegic Research Center. Today's talk is divided in 3 parts. First, I want to take you throughout a case study that I have titulated The Same Old Story. The second one is the goal, healthy aging. And the third and last point is the tool, rehabilitation. Let's go to the first topic, the case study, the same old story. And this is the story of Odile. Odile was my husband's grandmother. She was a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 4 and a great-grandmother of 2. She worked all her life as a maternal assistant. She became a widow when she was 70. After that, she continued living in her house. She was independent and active. When she was 76, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She continued living in her house with her daughter's assistance for 2 more years after that. After that time, it became possible for her daughters to provide the care she needed at home and to keep her out of danger. And that was the reason why she went to live to a nursing home. Here she remained independent, and apart from the dementia and a knee osteoarthritis, she was healthy. She could even dance. Last year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, 30% of the nursing home residents died, but she remained in good health, although she started to be limited in their mobility due to her knee pain. 3 months ago, she fell. She was put in bed rest and prescribed with painkillers. 1 week after that, while passing from the bed to the toilet, she fell again. She was again put in bed rest and prescribed with more painkillers. Only 3 days after the second time she fell, so the 10 days after the first fall, she was taken to the hospital. There, doctors discovered that she suffered fractures in both of her hips. And only 3 days after the diagnosis, she was taken to surgery. After that, she remained bedbound, developed a surgical site infection, and after a sepsis, she died just 1 month after she fell. I think the case of Odile went wrong. What do you think that went wrong? Do you think this was a dignified death? And do you think that Odile's case is an example of healthy aging? Well, if you think not, let me take you to the rest of the talk. I think Odile's story is the same old story, because we have all heard about one of our relatives or a close friend that after a fall and after having a hip fracture, the decline in the functional abilities was abrupt and very often took them to death. We have brief summary of statistics that also tell us that this is an old story, that it keeps repeating itself. At least 95% of hip fractures are caused by falls. At 1 year follow-up, 20% of frequent fallers are in hospital, in full-time care, or have died. fracture is recorded at the cause of more than 50% of serious accidental injuries, admissions, and 39% of fatal injuries. So my question is, if this is an old story, why do we keep failing in 2021? To be able to know why we keep failing, we need to answer this question, and it's an essential one. What do we want? And I think we could all agree that we want this. Healthy aging. I think this is what this image is representing. So I think this is the goal, and I open the second segment of my presentation. The United Nations had declared 2021 to 2030 the decade of healthy aging, and of course has been supported by WHO and also by the general opinion. You can see headlines like these ones everywhere. Time for the world to invest in healthy aging is one of the strongest ones I have found. But what is healthy aging, also known as successful aging or active aging? Well, the most accepted definition is the following one. Healthy aging is the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. The decade for healthy aging have defined a set of values, like its rights-based response to population aging, includes all persons, including those who experience disease or disability. And very importantly, it aims to optimize functional ability with a whole of society approach. The decade has also established 4 goals. First one is to change how we think, feel, and act towards age and aging, ensure that communities foster the abilities of older people, the delivery of person-centered integrated care and primary health services that are responsive to the older people, and provide access to long-term care for older people who need it. And these are the 3 components of healthy aging: functional ability, intrinsic capacity, and environments. Let's take a look to each one of these. Intrinsic capacity comprises all the physical and mental capacities that a person can draw on. For example, how much strength do I have in my muscle? How much balance? How are my cognitive ability? How is my memory? How is my cardiovascular health? All those are the components of my own intrinsic capacity. Then I live with those intrinsic capacities in an environment. And the environment is not just the built environment, but it's also about the emotional support, the assistance, the laws, the services that are available, the cultural belief and customs. And when we take my intrinsic capacities in a specific environment, we have as a result functional ability. And what is functional ability? Is to be able to do the things that I need to do. For example, to make basic needs, the ability to learn, grow, and make decisions, ability to be mobile, to build and maintain relationships, and to contribute to society. The decade of healthy aging has also highlighted that we don't all age the same and have developed what is called aging trajectories. You can see here in the blue line, also highlighted with an A, it will be the perfect aging trajectory. So you born and you live healthy all your life with a slight decline in functioning until you died. Another possibility is that you start your life being sick, you continue being sick through your life, and you have a progressive functional decline, and then you died. Another option is that you are healthy for the first time of your life. Then you have a sudden event that declines your functioning. For example, a fall or an accident or an illness. Then several options can happen. You can, for example, recover fully and come back to your original trajectory. You can recover but not until the same level. Or you can continue a declining functioning and die. There are also more trajectories. However, the developing of these trajectories is part of the research agenda to better understand them, how they work, and what are the determinants. In our case study, I think this is the curve that will represent Odile's aging trajectory. She was healthy for the most part of her life. Then she developed Alzheimer's disease and have a steady decline of functioning, but not a very much one. And then after she fell, she had a sudden decrease in functioning until she died, only a month after the fracture. Also, the decade of healthy aging highlights that age is a poor predictor of functioning, because having a certain age does not equally or immediately correlates with the functional abilities. For example, here I'm showing you a comic in which a woman says, "I know soon death will take me." And then she said, "My body no longer functions, everything hurts." And she have apparently been in a conversation with death. She finally said, "I live a good life." And then death answered, "Ma'am, you are only 29, which means that age is not a good reflect of how we function and how do we feel. Now, the next question to open the third point of my presentation is how to achieve healthy aging. Well, if we are in this side of the abysm, then I can say that this is what we currently have. The situation that we have in which people is not aging as healthy as they could with the current technologies. And here in the other side, we have what we want, that is healthy aging. And I think that what we need to build a bridge between what we have and what we want is rehabilitation. And I want to take you through my third point to convince you perhaps about this. Rehabilitation is defined as an essential health service in the universal health coverage definition, together with promotion, prevention, treatment, and palliative care. Rehabilitation has been defined in the 2030 WHO initiative as being about health and functioning in everyday life. Rehabilitation is about being able to interact, to move, to be independent, and to communicate. I will add other functions like to be able to contribute to society, to do what is important to you and for your loved ones. It has been formally defined as a set of interventions to optimize functioning and reduce disability in individuals with a health condition in interaction with their environments. So it's to take what we have as individuals and how can we live with that intrinsic capacity, with that functioning level in society, and combining those two to do the things that matters to us. You can see that the rehabilitation definitions perfectly correlate with the understanding and definition of healthy aging. You can see first that we have intrinsic capacity and functional ability, and this corresponds what rehabilitation considers functioning. When you optimize functioning, you optimize at the same time intrinsic capacity and functional ability. And remember that rehabilitation do all these in the context of the person, meaning in the environment. In the screen, you can see the International Classification of Functional Disability and Health. That is the framework, or the conceptual framework of rehabilitation professionals that allow us to assess and implement interventions to improve functioning in people with a health condition. This framework is very important because allowed us to do many things. Among those, and the most important one, is that allow us to analyze a patient with any health condition with a set of impairments in body structures and functions that lives in an environment and has specific personal factors, and to see how all these characteristics affects the activities that a person can do and participation. When a person has limitations in the activities that can perform and restrictions in participation, this person has a decline in function or decline in functional abilities as is understood by the healthy aging decade. They define functional ability about having the capabilities that enable all people to be and do what they have reason to value, and this is precisely the goal of rehabilitation. The second important thing about the ICF classification conceptual framework is that the person is in the center. It's an integrated person-centered healthcare approach or healthcare service. Rehabilitation is also about rights. We as society have the responsibility to ensure that all people can participate in the activities that they value the most. And to ensure that all people can do this, they need to access all the essential health services that allows them to do this. Rehabilitation is the essential social response to healthy aging because it's instrumental in enhancing the social inclusion of aging persons with chronic conditions who experience disability. Rehabilitation is the tool that can allow us this. Older people that can fully participate, perform the activities of daily living, live in a couple, and participate to society. Rehabilitation needs are large and are steadily increasing. This is a recent tool developed by WHO that is called the WHO Rehabilitation Needs Estimator. And I invite you to check in the webpage. It's a very useful tool to realize the needs of rehabilitation. The most important number that you have in this slide is that 1 in 3 persons in the entire world have a health condition that could benefit from rehabilitation. This is 2.4 billion people. Also, the rehabilitation needs are steadily increasing over the years. You can see in the right the 1990 prevalence of years lived with disability and in 2019. And you can see that have increasing the needs, but especially in older age. In this slide, you can see the distribution of the different health conditions that can produce rehabilitation needs. I want to take your attention in the right side of your screen to the green needs. The needs the green are representing the musculoskeletal conditions and sensory impairments. You can see how in the middle age group from 15 to 64, these are largely represented, but you can see in people older than 65, there are still the biggest amount of rehabilitation needs are in musculoskeletal disorders and sensory impairments. What is interesting about these is that these are health conditions that largely benefit from rehabilitation, health conditions to which nowadays we have effective interventions to improve functioning in people affected with a musculoskeletal condition or with a sensory impairment. This means that the opportunity to increase functioning is very important. Also, please notice that this is occurring across regions. The needs are large. It doesn't matter where you look at it. However, even though we know that these needs are so large, still the biggest amount of money and investment and efforts is done in intervention that add years to life, and less is done to improve interventions that add lives to years. This is rehabilitation. It's not only about living longer, but it's about living longer, being more healthy, living longer, being able to do the activities you value and to be with the people you want to be or to perform the activities that you enjoy. But how could rehabilitation have changed Odil's story? In many ways, but I just want to provide you some examples. There are effective interventions for rehabilitation to improve each one of the components of healthy aging. Just to provide you a couple of examples, to improve intrinsic capacity, we can do strengthening, balance, and coordination exercises. To improve the environment, we can remove environmental factors that reduce the risk of falling, and we can build age-friendly environments. And finally, when combining these two interventions, we improve functional ability, but we can even go further, providing compensatory approaches on the interventions as assisted technology that, even though don't change the intrinsic capacity or the environment, increase the functional ability of a person. Rehabilitation does all these in cycles. We start, for example, by improving intrinsic capacity. Then we will adapt the environment or improve the environment to improve functional ability. And then we will start again over and over. We can do this during primary prevention, so avoiding that Odils fails in the first place. As secondary prevention, avoiding that Odils develop complications after she fell. And thirdly, helping her to recovery after she fell, recover all the functional abilities that she lost due to the falling. And rehabilitation does all this having Odile in the center. This is a person-centered approach, meaning that Odile has a voice to decide on her treatment, meaning that the interventions are targeted to the specific needs and preference of Odile, to her specific functional profile. We have reached the finish line of my presentation. So after having listened to me for 20 minutes, let me take you to a summary of my presentation so you can take home these messages. Our goal as society is to achieve healthy aging. Healthy aging is about adding life to years, not just adding years to life. Rehabilitation is the key health strategy to improve functioning and has also been appointed as the key health strategy of the 21st century. Rehabilitation needs are large and are steadily increasing. A couple of tasks for you to take home. We need to advocate for the strengthening of health system for the provision of rehabilitation services across the world. We need research to answer the challenge better. Finally, I hope that I managed to convince you that rehabilitation is the essential tool that we need to fill out the gaps in the bridge that we want to build between what we currently have and we want to achieve, that is healthy aging. So we can see more often these images, people aging healthy across the world, and also that we can avoid that Odile's story, it's still the same old story, that it stopped repeating itself. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your nice presentation, Dr. Seijas. Yes, thank you. It was very informative presentation. And now it is a Q&A session. Please write your session in the question section. Okay. If there is no question, I have one question. And Dr. Seijas, yes, okay. And
yeah, I'm here.
in the field of rehabilitation part, physical disability is very important. We are focusing on physical disability, right? Okay, for preventing some early disability, what kind of exercises or actions can be recommended? Can you explain it in detail?
Thank you for the question. So just first to specify that it's not just physical impairment. So rehabilitation is about sensory functions, cognitive abilities, and also physical impairments, right? And
Yes.
of course, the interventions to improve physical capacity and functional abilities will be targeted according to the person's health conditions, the body functions that are impaired, but also, and very importantly, what are the goals of that person? Perhaps and this develops really in the dialogue with the patient. The first thing we need to know is what is important for the patient, what are their goals, because they usually do not correlate with the goals of the health professionals. So perhaps we think that the most important is that the recovery, the ability to walk, for example. But it turns out that for the patient, the most important thing is to be able to control their bladder and to have a healthy bowel and release. So we really need to sit down, do the assessment, and take into account what is the person's wants to do. Where does this person want to participate, and where does this person want to, what are the activities that this person want to do?
Okay, thank you. I have another question. And I want to know, is there any difference between rehabilitation for healthy aging and traditional rehabilitation for patients with some disability like stroke or musculoskeletal disorders? What do you think that difference between them?
Oh, thank you. That's a good question. I will say no. There is in the principle of what is understood as rehabilitation, I don't think there is a difference. We share the same principles, and we could compare it with child rehabilitation. So it will be, we share the same principles. What can change is, of course, the interventions that are available. It will be different to make rehabilitation for a child with a spinal with a cerebral palsy, for example, than to do rehabilitation of an older person with stroke. And so they are different in the sense of the interventions and also what is currently being done in research and that we don't know until now is that we are trying to build what are the aging trajectories, so how a people age, and knowing how a person age, we can identify early the most appropriate interventions that can improve functional capacity in the long term. So it's a different way of approaching, but in the core understanding of rehabilitation is we can say it's the same. We shared the conceptual framework of the ICF classification. We work together the same health professionals in the same multidisciplinary teams, but we have different goals and different ways of establish the rehabilitation plan.
Okay, thank you for your answers and presentation again. Yes, yes, thank you. It's time to close this section. Yes, okay. Thank you again.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Yes, okay, thank you.
So let's move on to our next session for today. And we have with us Professor Sabarego, who will speak to us on the importance of research for healthy aging. And she will explore how research agenda on rehabilitation and healthy aging can contribute to achieving the goals of the decade of healthy aging. Professor Carla Sabrego is from the University of Lucerne in Switzerland, and she's a professor of rehabilitation and healthy aging and co-head of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Rehabilitation in the Global Health System. She co-leads the working group on disability policy and implementation research of the Swiss Paraplegic Research in Nottwil, Switzerland. And her research agenda focuses on modeling of healthy aging, its trajectories, and on improving the delivery of rehabilitation through health systems in the aging population. By profession, she's a clinical psychologist and has a PhD in health economics with a focus on cost effectiveness evaluations of rehabilitation programs. And she did a PhD, her master's and PhD at the Ludwig Maximilian University. That's a lovely university. I've visited that in Munich. She works as a senior researcher and lecturer at the Institute of Public Health and Health Services Research Munich for 15 years. And from 2011 to 2018, she was a WHO consultant in functioning and disability measurement and contributed, amongst others, to the development and implementation of model disability survey in a range of countries. So, welcome, Professor Carla Sabriego. Let's watch her video.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation to talk at the ISPRM International Rehabilitation Week. I have been appointed as a professor for rehabilitation and health aging in 2021, so it's a great pleasure for me to talk about the link between these two areas, more specifically how rehabilitation can contribute to achieving the goals of the current decade of healthy aging and also to present you my research agenda. Let us start with some definitions. Healthy aging has been defined by WHO as the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. For me, this ideal of well-being is very well represented in this painting called The Flute Player by Cândido Portinari, a famous artist of my home country, Brazil. I will be using this picture throughout my presentation to help us keep in mind what we want to achieve with research at the end of the day. So the question is, what links healthy aging to rehabilitation or end rehabilitation? Well, rehabilitation is described by WHO as a set of interventions to optimize functioning in persons with health conditions in interaction with the environment. Given that functional ability and functioning refer actually to the same ICF concept, we see that rehabilitation has the means to meaningfully contribute to achieving the goals of healthy aging. Nevertheless, rehabilitation is just marginally mentioned as a health strategy in key documents, for instance the WHO World Report on Aging and Health, published in 2015, or the recently launched WHO Baseline Report for the Decade of Healthy Aging. It's up to us to change this fact and move rehabilitation to a more prominent place, ideally by conducting high-quality research. But what is meant by functional ability or functioning? Functional ability or functioning are defined as the outcome of the interaction between the intrinsic capacity, this means all the physical and mental capabilities of an individual, and the built, social, attitudinal, and political context of a person. As we age, we lose capacity due to health conditions or due to health decrements associated with the aging process itself. This is represented by the red line in the graph that you see. The blue line represents an ideal regarding functional ability. If we have access to appropriate health interventions and a supportive environment, we can keep good levels of functional ability even while capacity continues to decline. Ideally, rehabilitation contributes to the improvement of functional ability by improving capacity as well as by targeting environmental factors such as assistive technologies and accommodations at home, for example. A very important aspect of the healthy aging concept is the understanding that functional ability is diverse, heterogeneous. Health aging is an ongoing process leading to specific trajectories of both intrinsic capacity and functional ability over time. This means that we do not have one trajectory, but potentially many. In the WHO World Bank World Report on Aging and Health, this graph is used to exemplify this. In the y-axis, we have functioning, a functioning scale, ranging from very low levels, the red parts, to very high levels, the very green area. In the x-axis, we see age. The blue curve, called A, represents the ideal for functioning, what we all want to achieve, right? So to keep very high levels of functioning throughout our lives. The yellow curve, called B, represents what may happen after a negative event, let's say an accident or acute illness. When the trajectory goes abruptly down, three scenarios are possible. A person can fully recover and come back to the blue line. This is the first dashed line. The person can partially recover but won't go back to the previous level. This is the usual line. Or the person might rapidly deteriorate, probably when no treatment or support is in place. The red curve, called C, might represent a person with a chronic progressive disease. The loss of functioning is continuous and steady, but it can be optimized as shown in the dashed line if effective treatments are in place. But our question, or my question in pursuing a research agenda, is how rehabilitation can contribute to the healthy aging agenda. The World Report on Aging and Health has a range of priority areas for action, and among them, two I personally can contribute to based on my expertise in rehabilitation. One area is related to the modeling of health aging trajectories, which are actually functioning trajectories, and this area is focused on the improvement needed regarding their measurement, monitoring, and understanding. And the second area is related to health systems strengthening, the development of or improvement of access to interventions that focus on intrinsic capacity and functional ability, as rehabilitation does. So let me briefly walk you through the research agenda I pursue at the University of Lucerne and that is directly connected to our WHO Collaborating Center for Rehabilitation in Global Health Systems. The agenda has two streams, and as you remember, what I want to achieve at the end of the day is well-being in old age. So the flute player is here to help us keep that in mind. In the first stream, I'm working with the support of my team on the modeling of functioning trajectories, accounting for individual and context diversity, and on using those functioning trajectories, or also called health aging trajectories, to identify specific targets and timings for rehabilitation. In a nutshell, I want to know what should we offer, for whom, and when. For doing this, I very much rely on evidence generated by a very interesting project called Atlas, which was funded by the European Commission and completed last year. The second stream is dedicated to the development of tailored rehabilitation strategies that focus on intrinsic capacity, also taking into account psychological resources, that are also focused on functional ability, mainly by looking at assistive technologies, accommodations at home or work, and important here, that are shaped to the needs of persons with specific trajectories of functioning, acknowledging diversity. Again, what should I deliver, for whom, and when? In this stream, we intend to use a participatory approach involving health professionals as much as possible to ensure ownership. For being a university, the agenda has a strong element of capacity building at master, bachelor, and PhD level. Usually, an academic research agenda would stop here and leave this blank space between the evidence we generate in the streams and the picture of the flute player, our ideal of well-being in older age. We somehow assumed for quite a long time that magically evidence translates into policy and practice. But let me give you an example of cardiovascular research, an area that receives considerable funding. How many years do you think that have passed from evidence on the value of beta blockers after heart attack to routine use in practice? Well, 25 years. 25. And I hope you will agree with me that this is not acceptable. For this reason, the National Academy of Medicine in the US came up in 2012 with the idea of learning health systems. There are systems that learn when cyclic processes facilitate the exchange between research and practice or policy. Key elements of learning health systems are, among others, the use of implementation tools to facilitate and speed up evidence transfer, as well as the collection of relevant data for monitoring, evaluation, integration of new evidence, and timely identification of issues. Minding the usual and unacceptable gap between academic research and practice or policy, I intend to establish a learning health system for rehabilitation and health aging in collaboration with WHO through our WHO Collaborating Center. What do I want to achieve? I want to facilitate, actually to speed up, the uptake of our research results into policy and practice, and to ensure routine measurement of intrinsic capacity and functional ability. This part has also a strong element of capacity building in form of regional and global e-learning training for policymakers. That's all for me. I thank you very much for your attention, and I very much hope that I have motivated you to engage in research in this area. Thank you very much. To engage in
Professor Sabriego, thank you very much for that very clear and crisp presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
It is so inspiring. You've done great work over the years, and I'm sure that many will pick it up and put it into practice, especially from policy level and the rest of it. I'm just looking to see if there are questions for you. I do not see any. Our moderators for today, everyone? Yes, Chang, you want to ask something? Yes, please.
Yes, I have one question. Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Sabriego, Dr. Sabriego. And the research on aging is important, right? But many clinicians or researchers don't have fundamental facilities or tools for aging research. So a lot of doctors cannot conduct research on healthy aging, even they want to do the research. What is the solution for that?
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. It's a pleasure. And yeah, and I really enjoy what you are doing in terms of bringing the discourse here, or this platform for exchange of ideas. Your question is very important. So what to do when we don't have the possibilities, or you said the tools, the facilities for conducting research. And this is what I mean by when I say at the end of my presentation, I want to introduce an element of what's called implementation research. And this part, the filling the gap, is kind of a bridge, between practice or policy, but let's say practice in this case, and academic research. So what I try to do with my research agenda is to make it possible that persons working really as clinicians have the opportunity to directly contribute and collaborate with research as partners, not only doing something for me or my team because we're interested, but really as partners. And in very concrete terms, what we can do is like provide scholarships, so that people can take some time off of the clinical work, because usually if you're working as a clinician, you work for many hours, you won't have much energy afterwards, right, for conducting research. So really to make sure that we can free some time of clinicians who have a very deep understanding of what they do in terms of rehabilitation and aging, and really to bring them more and more into research. So I'm very much for the bridge, for bridging the two worlds.
Thank you so much.
There was a question earlier, but it disappeared from my.
Well, I have a question.
Any question? Oh yeah, Constanza,
yeah.
You wanted to ask a question. Yeah, it was your name. Yeah.
Yes, Professor Sabariego, do you think community rehabilitation strategies play a role in the functional ability maintenance through aging? And the other question is, what role do you think assistive technology can have on this in the near future?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Very, very good questions. I think, yes, that community, so that rehabilitation provided at the community has an essential role on also supporting the process of healthy aging. Why? Because mostly when we are thinking about the community, we are thinking about the gatekeepers. Usually the very first persons that older persons, or perhaps not so old persons, will get in touch to. So I think personally that it's very, very important to make sure that we have rehabilitation provided through what we call primary health care, that also will include the more broader understanding of the community. Currently, we are working, so I have a research agenda, and I'm very lucky that Dr. Vanessa Sejas, who just spoke, is working with me in my team, and we are pursuing one systematic review, one scoping review, overview of what is out there, trying to understand which models of rehabilitation for the aging population are there in different settings, including the community. So I cannot give you an answer now how it looks like, but we are trying to better understand how it looks like and really to look, okay, can we improve? Can we perhaps change something and make it better? So my intention is to have things better if they are not good enough yet. Yeah. And I think the other point that you mentioned, assistive technologies, is also really, very important, and it plays a big role. And I think from my time working at WHO, it was very much important, also in the sense that you have the provision of assistive technologies, but you also have to pay a bit of attention to the commercial interests associated to assistive technologies, so that you don't deliver things or tools that are not really good for the persons. So you have to make sure that you have the fit between what you are delivering and the person who is receiving it. And in terms of this understanding of capacity and functioning, it plays a huge role, because I think it's one of the tools that we have, the possibilities that we have of improving functional ability, functioning, when we have exhausted perhaps the possibilities that we have of improving capacity.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. If there's nothing else, we would like to thank Professor Carla Sabrego very much for sharing and also for enlightening us on research in healthy aging and the importance of it for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also very much for the invitation, if you're really pleased. Thank you.
Okay, so now we will watch a video message from Dr. Fiston Mampuyan Gond, President of our affiliated PRM National Society in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
ISPRM depuis Kinshasa, en République démocratique du Congo. Le docteur Fiston Mampuya, président en exercice du Conseil national des médecins physiques et de réadaptation. Nous sommes très flattés de participer à ce sujet intitulé La réadaptation pour un vieillissement en bonne santé. La bonne santé qui pour nous n'est pas que l'absence de la maladie, mais un état de bien-être global sur le plan physique, social, économique, mental, financier et autres. Comprenez que vieillir en bonne santé ne soit que le respect strict de la mise en application d'une manière optimale d'un ensemble de mesures concourant au bien-être de la personne, afin de réduire sa situation de dépendance consécutive à sa santé, situation interagissant avec l'environnement, le tout afin d'une sécurité sanitaire et sociale aisée. Ainsi, nous pouvons confirmer fermement que la réadaptation pour un vieillissement en bonne santé est une réalité. Merci.
We now want to inform you of a conference in Cameroon that is being organized by one of our members, Dr. Sinforian Kambu, and his colleagues from the Center for Promotion of Rehabilitation and Disability Research. It's going to be a hybrid meeting. You can be there in person if you're in Cameroon, but it will also be available on Zoom. Dr. Kambo has a video message to tell you more about this event.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Senforian Kambu. I am a neurophysician in Cameroon, and I am also the director of the Center for Promotion of Rehabilitation Medicine and Disability Research. It's a great pleasure for me to make this short video to introduce you one great event that we are preparing for December 9th, 2021. Actually, our center is organizing a conference titled Rehabilitation 2030, a call for action, what perspective for the public health system in Cameroon. For this event, we will have the participation of great speakers as Dr. Uta de Groot from WHO Rehabilitation Program. We will also have other speakers like Professor Francesca Dimitriando, Dr. Carlo Chickens, and Professor Lens Jorge. And we will also have some others great speakers from Cameroon. For this event, we would like to thank all the organizations as WHO Rehabilitation Program and as ISPRM who support us for the organization of this for this event. Our aim is just to promote or to contribute to strengthen rehabilitation in health system in Cameroon. This is our goal. And we hope that the conference that we are organizing will be a first step for achieving this goal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now, let's welcome the ISPRM President, Professor Leonardo Lee, who's connecting live from Hong Kong to say a few words.
Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending which part of the world you are. To support the International Day of Disability, and ISPRM organized this 5 days online event with speakers of PRN specialists and persons related to the field of rehabilitation. I hope the lectures, discussion, and debate held in these 5 days were of benefit to all audience. And I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of ISPRN. I put forward our sincere thanks to all speakers and audience participate in this event. And you can see the slide, which lists out the 15 speakers with presentations and 12 interviews panelists that helping this 5 days program. Next slide, please. And we had 13 moderators, and 3 of them are with us at present. Next slide, please. And here's the list of the organizing committee. They're hardworking in last few months to make this 5 days events being materialized. Thank you very much to all of you. And lastly, I would like to thank the central office of ISPRN, Jessica and Nicolai, to help to organize the physical meeting through online instead of meeting face to face. And of course, my colleagues in the President Cabinet who also their full support to this event. And lastly, I would also like to remind all the PRN specialists and also doctors or allied health workers in the field of rehabilitation that the ISPRM 2022 will be held in Lisbon in July next year. Please submit your abstract and participate in this very, very important event so that we have a gathering, hopefully, after the pandemic, to meet face to face physically in Lisbon to have update knowledge and skills in the field of rehabilitation medicine. Thank you very much, everybody, the speakers and the audience again. And I hope you all are healthy and see you soon in Lisbon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Leonard. Take care.
Nice to see you. online.
We now kindly ask you to remain connected for a few moments to reply to our quick poll questions about your experience today. Which session did you enjoy the most? Select one out of 3. Yes. Did you experience any technical difficulties? Yes or no?
Okay, so that was the poll, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And with this, we conclude the ISPRM International Rehabilitation Week 2021. We hope you have enjoyed the sessions, and remember that if you missed any, you will be able to watch them via the online program page as soon as the recordings are available. You will be notified next week. Please remember to share on social media the hashtag ISPRM Rehab Week, and thank you for participating and for allowing the discussion on this important topic of healthy aging. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take
Thank you,
care.
Nicole and people at ISPRM office.
Thank you very much.